Exclusive contract with Feilu Novel Network Novel. Siheyuan. Divorce from Qin Huairu. At the beginning, upon waking up, young Deming traveled back to the world of, full of love in a courtyard. Becoming a member of the security department. And, due to catching Silly Zhu stealing a lunchbox, he was knocked unconscious by a brick from Silly Zhu. At this moment, young Deming activated the Life Simulator. After each life simulation, you can randomly receive rewards. You ran into the foolish pillar who stole public grain and was knocked unconscious by the foolish pillar. You were hospitalized for a week and returned to the courtyard, only to find that your ancestral home was occupied by the Qinhuai Ru family, while your grandmother had already passed away for several days. Upon learning the truth, you were furious and stormed into Qinhuai Ru's house, charging at her. In the end, you walked towards Yuzhu and Zhonghai's house with a knife. Young Deming looked at these experiences and felt a bit confused. Then, proceed with the simulation. During the recovery period, you returned to the courtyard and prevented the behavior of those animals. Damao seems to be mocking you, as if he's trying to. Feilu Novel Network reminds you that this novel and its characters are purely fictional. If there are any similarities, they are purely coincidental and should not be imitated. Chapter 1. Birds causing harm to my family, causing destruction and human death. Qinhuai Ru. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Birds causing harm to my family, causing destruction and human death. Qinhuai Ru occupying my ancestral home. Go after her. Where am I? Smelling the strong smell of disinfectant in the air. Young Deming, who had a splitting headache, suddenly opened his eyes. He suppressed the feeling of nausea and looked around. On the wooden door painted with green paint, there are several bright red letters written, First People's Hospital. How am I in the hospital? This scene with a strong historical atmosphere slowly brought young Deming back to his senses. He was surprised to find himself lying on a hospital bed. And he even had several bandages tied to his head. Young Deming instinctively touched his head with his hand, and a wave of pain struck again. Along with it comes a flood of information and images flooding into my mind. In no time, young Deming fully accepted the new memories that appeared in his mind. It turned out that young Deming had traveled to the world of, full of love in a courtyard. He also became a security guard who had just joined the security department of Red Star Steel Rolling Plant. As an employee of the Red Star Steel Rolling Plant, young Deming naturally resides in the Red Star courtyard. Young Deming's mother passed away early due to difficult childbirth, and his father also died on the battlefield several years ago. Young Deming, who was raised by his grandmother since childhood, and his foster sister Lin Xiaoxue. Lin Xiaoxue's father and young Deming's father were comrades in arms and ultimately died in the same battle. Lin Xiaoxue, who was helpless, was adopted by young Deming's grandmother, and the family of three relied on each other. The hard-working child had already taken over the family, and influenced by his parents, young Deming couldn't tolerate sand from a young age. On his first day as a security guard at the Red Star Steel Rolling Plant, he caught Yuzhu on the spot who was going back with a lunchbox. As the licking dog of widow Qin Huairu, Yuzhu had no intention of admitting his mistake and handing over his lunchbox even if he was caught by young Deming. Young Deming is not as easily fooled as other security guards in the face of Yuzhu, a slick old fogey. Young Deming's law enforcement attitude was resolute, and without saying a word, he caught Yuzhu and wanted to drag him to the security department. Seeing that young Deming is so difficult to deal with, Yuzhu's violent temper is also easy to deal with. Between the two pushing and shoving, Yuzhu suddenly exerted all his strength and punched young Deming. Young Deming was already dragging Yuzhu back, and he never expected Yuzhu to suddenly take action. This punch caught young Deming off guard, directly causing his body to lose balance, stumbling back a few steps. Finally, young Deming hit the back of his head on the ground and passed out on the spot. Before young Deming completely lost consciousness, his eyes blurred as Yuzhu let out a curse and cursed before leaving the scene. In other words, the original Yang Deming had already been accidentally killed by Yuzhu, but now Yang Deming has just crossed over. TSK. Is this silly pillar really special? He's not human. Yang Deming slowly sat up from the hospital bed, frowning slightly. This beast is really cunning and ruthless in its actions. Yang Deming lightly touched the swollen cheek with his hand. That bruise was left by Yuzhu's punch. As the saying goes, injustice has its head, and debt has its owner. Yuzhu injured Yang Deming and even caused his death. Yang Deming naturally won't let go of Yuzhu. He will personally settle this account with Yuzhu. However, Yuzhu is a master of the Courtyard house. The Qinhuai Ru family relied on Yuzhu to support their livelihood. Zhonghai and the deaf old lady are counting on Yuzhu to take care of their old age and see them off. It is not a simple matter for Yang Deming to seek revenge on Yuzhu. But in Yang Deming's impression, this bird filled the courtyard and there were no good people. If those beasts come up with crooked ideas on me and my family, I won't let either of them or silly pillar go. Yang Deming became determined to fight back and forth with the flock of birds, and at that moment, several voices suddenly rang out in his mind. Ding! Life Simulator is starting. The host has already started Life Simulator. From now on, the host will have one chance to simulate life every day. After each life simulation, the host can randomly receive 3 rewards. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a life simulation opportunity. Would you like to start the simulation now? A life simulator. Upon hearing the sound echoing in his mind, Yang Deming couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Thinking that people have already traveled through time, it's not surprising to suddenly start a life simulator. Conduct a life simulation. With Yang Deming giving instructions, the voice in his mind rang out again. Life simulation begins. Strange scenes paired with words floated in Yang Deming's mind, like a lantern, allowing him to experience a brand new life. You ran into Yuzhu, who was stealing public food. He refused to arrest and clashed with you. He knocked you unconscious and fled the scene. Due to untimely treatment, your brain and nerves were injured, resulting in occasional weakness in your left leg. You were hospitalized for a week and returned to the courtyard, only to find that your ancestral home had already been occupied by the Qinhuai Ru family. Your grandmother had passed away for several days, and your sister was nowhere to be found. You lived alone in the small house where you piled up miscellaneous items in the backyard. Due to a root cause of illness in your body, you are unable to continue working as a security guard. In order to support yourself, you bought a set of carpentry tools, went to the library every day to read relevant books, and self-studied carpentry skills. After self-study for a period of time, you started working at a carpenter's shop. As a determined person, you stepped into the rhythm of work and your skills improved quickly. You met the graduating female college student Ran Qiuya at the library where you often went. Damao and everyone in the courtyard are showing off that he is about to go on a blind date with Liu Xiaoyi, the daughter of director Liu. He also has a strange and disgusting attitude towards you and Yuzhu, saying that some people may never find a wife in their lifetime. Damao and Liu Xiao's blind date was disrupted by a few thugs and ruffians. Damao was frightened and fled. As you passed by the alley, you saw several thugs planning to disrespect a girl. With a righteous heart, you picked up the freshly made wooden stool and threw it at them. Terrifying and fearless, several criminals were scared away by your desperate demeanor. As a brave and righteous person, you were praised by the street office, and Liu Xiao fell in love with you. Damao, jealous and resentful, planned to use a knife to kill someone. In order to stir up trouble, he revealed the truth about your sister's disappearance and grandmother's passing. On the day you fell into a coma and were hospitalized, Yuzhu and Grandpa Zhonghai approached your grandmother and lied to her that you had died of heart shock despite rescue efforts. Zhonghai said he wanted to find someone to adopt and take care of your sister, but in reality, he found a human trafficker to kidnap her to a remote mountainous area. Upon learning the truth, you were furious. Thinking that Qin Huairu had ultimately profited and taken over your ancestral home, you went straight into Qin Huairu's house to attack her out of disgust and foolishness. In the end, you walked towards Yuzhu and Zhonghai's house with a knife. You were arrested for committing murder and killing several people, and this massacre resulted in you being sentenced to death. The life simulation is over, and you will receive the following 3 rewards. The life experience of this simulation. 2. Security guards fighting skills for capturing enemies. 3. First level carpenter craftsmanship. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. Chapter 2. Go find the security department and street office. Must. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Go find the security department and street office. We must send all the birds to eat their meals. After the life simulation ended, young Deming seemed to have truly experienced that period of life. And the anger in his heart also rushed straight to his head, his eyes turning red, and he clenched his fist. Ha! He laughed back in anger and gritted his teeth, saying, "Lie to my grandmother. Sell my sister. Only these beasts can do it. It's true that the courtyard is filled with birds." Young Deming learned from his memory that his grandmother Feng Xiuying was a kind old lady, and his sister Lin Xiaoxue was also a sensible and lovely girl. Now that he has traveled over, they are also his relatives. In the life experience he just simulated, Qinhuai Ru finally occupied his house and occupied the magpie's nest. Although this widow is shrewd and cunning, her family has lost a man, leaving only the elderly, weak, women, and children. I don't think she has the confidence to do so. So, there must be someone behind her to support her, and this person young Deming doesn't need to think too much. Apart from licking the silly dog pillar, there is no one else. The problem is, although Silly Zhu is tall and powerful, he can be considered the leader of a quadrangle. But there was no brain that planned this series of conspiracies. Young Deming's eyes flashed with a gleam of light, and the mastermind behind this series of conspiracies must be the righteous Zhonghai. Zhonghai has no children under his knee, and in order to support his retirement plan, he has always wanted to bring Silly Zhu and Qinhuai Ru together, so that they can provide him with retirement. He was able to plan this conspiracy, and young Deming was not surprised. What a clever plan. It's simply not as good as a beast. The thought of my family being destroyed by those 3 beasts in a simulated life. Young Deming felt extremely resentful in his heart and couldn't help but grit his teeth and say, Zhonghai, Yuzhu, Qinhuai Ru, wait, I will definitely not let you go. I must send you to jail. Because young Deming woke up in time, Zhonghai's conspiracy had not yet begun, and his grandmother and sister were still unharmed. And young Deming completely recognized the true face of these beasts and vowed to make them pay the price. Nowadays, the most important thing is to prevent Zhonghai from carrying out the conspiracy. Young Deming had a plan in mind and immediately sat up from the hospital bed, but his left leg softened and he almost fell. Young Deming suddenly remembered that after being knocked unconscious by the silly pillar, his left leg had fallen from the root of the disease due to not seeking medical attention in a timely manner, sometimes becoming weak and weak. This revenge young Deming has been written on Silly Zhu's head, swearing to avenge it. Young Deming asked the nurse to find a crutch as a contingency. He immediately approached his colleagues from the security department of the Red Star steel rolling plant upon discharge and revealed the truth about his coma. Colleagues suddenly realized and felt righteous indignation towards Silly Zhu's behavior. They looked sympathetically at the discharge report and cane brought by young Deming. I said, Deming, why did you knock the back of your head for no reason? It turns out it was that bastard Yuzhu who did a good job. When you were just taken to the hospital, some people said they had seen you argue with Yuzhu before. The brothers went to ask, but Yuzhu actually said that you didn't stand firm and fell in the back of your head. He just passed by and it's none of his business. He's really shameless. Yuzhu has caused you to be permanently disabled, brothers will definitely not let him go. Young Deming thought to himself, Yuzhu is just a mischievous and slippery dog. I naturally don't have the courage to admit what he did well, and it's already good not to give him a beating. I, young Deming, am not easy to bully either. I came here this time to seek justice from my brothers. Upon hearing this, the colleagues in the security department looked sympathetic and expressed their willingness to help him stand out. Yuzhu bullies people too much. It's really easy to bully someone from our security department. We'll help you recover justice. Young Deming was deeply moved and asked several colleagues to report to the police station first. You can tell me then that someone in the Red Star Courtyard is planning to kidnap and sell children. Colleagues don't know how this matter got involved in child trafficking, and they all ask in confusion what the situation is. Young Deming took the opportunity to speak out the good deeds that Zhonghai and the others were preparing to do. When defending Cotton, they fell silent, their eyes widened one by one as if they had seen a ghost, and after looking at each other, they suddenly burst into foul language. Beasts. Shameless to the extreme. How could such a thing happen in broad daylight? They're simply not human. Young Deming smiled bitterly and said. I didn't expect them to be so vicious. Fortunately, I have been discharged from the hospital, otherwise the consequences would be unimaginable. Colleagues were filled with righteous indignation. Don't worry, Deming. Let's help you with this matter and we won't let those beasts succeed. Zhonghai usually looks righteous and upright, but he never expected such a shameless and righteous person to be hidden behind his back. It's really better than a beast. Yuzhu and Qinhuai Ru are not good things, they are like birds of a feather with Zhonghai. We'll go call the police for you right away. A few colleagues rushed out of the Red Star steel rolling plant without saying a word and headed towards the police station. Young Deming plans to go to the street office to find Director Wang, and his colleagues in the security department who are available follow him one after another. We'll go with you and support you. Those beasts will definitely not escape the punishment of the law. Everyone arrived at the street office, and Director Wang watched as a group of people came over in great soup. She was immediately startled and sternly asked the leader Young Deming. Young Deming, what are you bringing so many people here for? After Young Deming told Director Wang the whole story, her attitude immediately underwent a 180-degree change. Director Wang looked sympathetically at the bruises on his face and the crutch in his hand, and let out a deep sigh. You old Yang's family are all miserable people. How could such a thing happen? Yuzhu and Zhonghai are really not the same thing. Yuzhu hit someone and couldn't admit it, causing you to knock your head and faint. I don't know if he took you to the hospital and left on his own. If it weren't for this, your left leg wouldn't have fallen ill. Moreover, Zhonghai actually plans to kidnap and sell your sister. What a black-hearted liver that has been struck by lightning. What a sin. And the woman Qin Huairu, who looked so pitiful at the orphan and widowed mother, never expected her heart to be so black. She's also a woman with children. How could she bear to watch Zhonghai sell someone else's child? Director Wang angrily cursed at Zhonghai, Yuzhu, and Qin Huairu. In my heart, I detest and despise these three beasts to the extreme, and I wish I could immediately rush to them and slap their ears. As long as you are a conscientious and normal person, hearing this is the same reaction. Moreover, Director Wang himself has children, so he naturally hates such trafficking incidents even more. Young Deming said coldly. What Zhonghai and the three of them have done is unacceptable, and I hope Director Wang can give me justice. Director Wang sympathetically patted his shoulder with a serious expression. Don't worry, this matter is simply shocking. Animals are not as good as birds. I will definitely help you investigate to the end. Take it seriously. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. Chapter 3. Zhonghai, deaf old lady, full of mind calculation. Foolish. You are listening at novel.Audio. Chapter 3. Zhonghai, deaf old lady, full of mind calculation. Silly pillar wishes young Deming died. At this moment, in the Red Star courtyard, Grandpa Zhonghai had already approached the deaf old lady, and as soon as he entered, he said. Young Deming hit the back of his head today and was taken to the hospital for treatment. He is still unconscious. The deaf old lady has a thin and small figure, with a hunchback and a crutch in her hand. She has sharp triangular eyes. As soon as she heard these words, she immediately clasped her hands and opened her mouth with only a few teeth, laughing loudly. Okay. That kid young Deming has been living for so many years in vain. Even if I walk on the road for nothing, I'll bump on the back of my head. It's really useless. The harshness of the deaf old lady's gloating is undoubtedly evident. Zhonghai patted his thigh with a worried expression on his face, and his mouth was filled with malice. If you ask me, young Deming will die if he dies himself, and it won't affect our affairs anyway. But the reason he fell into a coma was because the silly pillar pushed him. When he woke up, it would be great to investigate this matter. Anyway, now there are only him and the deaf old lady, and Zhonghai is too lazy to pretend to be righteous and show his sinister side. The deaf old lady is gloating with her toothless mouth open. Upon hearing these words, my eyes immediately widened. Young Deming, who killed me this day. He died right after he died, but unfortunately he wanted to harm silly pillar. I don't know what kind of person Silly Zhu is, do I? It must be young Deming who started. He deserves it. He's just a pitiful idiot. Zhonghai didn't feel anything wrong with her words and nodded in agreement. Isn't that right? That kid young Deming is just a disaster. They should have driven the young family out of the Red Star courtyard. The deaf old lady was extremely ruthless and made a decision immediately. Don't let Silly Zhu suffer. We must drive the young family out of the courtyard. When the time comes, let's see how young Deming can still cause trouble for Silly Zhu. Upon hearing these words, Zhonghai immediately asked. Patriarch, what do you have in mind? The deaf old lady's triangular eyes flashed with a hint of darkness. I used to dislike their young family, but now young Deming is in a coma and hospitalized, leaving only an old lady named Feng Xiuying and that little girl named Lin Xiaoxue lying in bed. This is a great opportunity. Listen to me, go tell the old lady over there that young Deming died without being rescued. The old lady on that side already had a bad heart, and if she was hit, she would definitely not be able to survive. Upon hearing these words, Zhonghai slapped his thigh and spoke loudly. Good idea. If there is an old man in the family, it's like having a treasure. You are still deaf and resourceful, old lady. The deaf old woman chuckled inwardly, but in fact, she also had her own careful thoughts about this matter. She had no children but lived a carefree life because she pretended to be a martyr's family member and managed to secure a spot in the 5 guarantees household. Each quadrangle only has one quota for the 5 guarantees household. If young Deming really dies, Grandma Feng's health will be worse than hers, and she will still be a legitimate martyr's family member. She will definitely replace her as the new 5 guarantees household. How can the deaf old lady accept such a result, as she is now relying on subsidies from the 5 guarantee households to survive? So, she tried every means possible to kill Grandma Feng. Zhonghai's face was full of calculations, and his calculations in his heart were playing with a snap. He chuckled inwardly and said. To be honest with you, the old lady had already contacted a good trafficker before I came here. I will sell Lin Xiaoxue after school. In this way, the house of Lao Yang's family will be empty, just right for Qin Huairu and his whole family to live in. Upon hearing this, the deaf old lady widened her eyes and exclaimed curiously. Can you sell a girl like this in public? Zhonghai waved his hand and proudly said. How could I do such a foolish thing? I must find a good reason, so that others can't pick on the wrong side and get practical benefits from it. Let's just say that young Deming is dead, and the old lady from the Yang family is also dead. For the sake of her pitiful helplessness, we kindly found a family for her to adopt. At that time, not only will no one talk about us, but they will also praise us for our kindness. The deaf old lady smiled and said, "Okay, okay. I can rest assured of your work, let's just do it this way." Zhonghai smiled and walked out of the deaf old lady's house, ready to walk towards the young family. In fact, he also has his own calculations in his heart, not just for the sake of foolishness. He has always wanted to match up Silly Zhu and Qinhuai Ru, and the reason why he went to great lengths to plan such a sinister event is that he wants Qinhuai Ru's eldest son, Jiu, to occupy the magpie's nest. It's just to use Lao Yang's house as a new house for Silly Zhu and Qinhuai Ru, so that they can remember his affection and provide him with retirement in the future. Zhonghai was happily calculating in his heart, as if he had already seen his beautiful old age. As a result, I saw Silly Zhu frowning and cursing in front of me. Bad luck. What bad luck? Zhonghai walked over with a smile and asked. Silly pillar, what's wrong with you? You're in a bad mood. Silly Zhu seemed to be the one he trusted, so he immediately poured out his bitterness. It's not that kid young Deming. He was actually taken to the hospital for treatment, why didn't he just die? Even if I die directly, I won't have any trouble. Now when he's discharged from the hospital, I will always seek justice from me. He didn't stand firm himself, what's the matter with me? Even if he dies, it's not my business. Upon hearing this, Zhonghai quickly comforted him and then revealed his plans with the deaf old lady. When the old lady of the Yang family dies and Lin Xiaoxue is sold, the Yang family's courtyard will be occupied by Qin Huairu's family. Can Qin Huairu still remember your love and hello when the time comes? Upon hearing this, Silly Zhu immediately showed his worried expression, clapped his hands, and smiled with a smile on his face. That's a great idea. You are my lucky star, Grandpa E. I don't know how to thank you so much. Alright, let me go find the old lady from the Yang family with you. There will be more people to persuade her, and we won't be afraid that she won't fall for it. Silly Zhu was overjoyed to think that Qin Jie would be with him in the future. The two of them arrived at Lao Yang's doorstep with great calculation, deliberately brewing their emotions for a while. Finally, he pretended to be sad and knocked on the door, ready to enter and deceive others. Cough cough. Who is it? Grandma Fong heard some noise at the door and coughed a few times. The door is not closed, come in directly. Zhonghai and Silly Zhu smiled sinister and were about to enter. Just then, a familiar voice came from behind them. Stop me. Seeking data. As long as there are 300 flowers, 10 will change immediately. As long as there is a reward or a comment, add it now. Seeking support. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. Chapter 4. Zhonghai pleads for Silly Zhu. Even him. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Zhonghai pleads for Silly Zhu. Take him along. Zhonghai and Silly Zhu were already feeling guilty and scared by the sudden sound, causing their feet to soften a bit. They have been living in a courtyard for so many years, so naturally they are very familiar with this voice, which is clearly young Deming's voice. How did this kid appear at this time? Disrupted their plans. It's unlucky to come at this time, whether you come early or late. Both of them cursed inwardly and turned around to take a look. Young Deming was leaning on a cane, staring coldly at them. Zhonghai always likes to put on a dignified appearance in front of others. Although he wished to point at young Deming and curse him for ruining his own good deeds in his heart. But his face showed a hypocritical concern for young Deming. Is it Deming? Why did you come back now? I heard you were injured and hospitalized. Just now, I told Silly Zhu that you came. You suffered such a serious injury, why were you discharged so quickly? You should have taken a good rest in the hospital. Looking coldly at Zhonghai pretending, young Deming felt extremely nauseous in his heart, and he was too lazy to compromise with this guy. The foolish pillar beside him immediately became furious. What is Yang Deming? You dare to show your face to them? Silly Zhu originally hated Yang Deming for suddenly appearing and interrupting his good deeds, and his daydream of being with Qinhuai Ru was shattered. He immediately arrogantly looked up and down at Yang Deming, and the yin-yang monster said. Oh! Isn't this Yang Deming? Why did you lean on a crutch? Is this a cripple? Aren't you just a useless person in the future? Yang Deming's face was even colder than Silly Pillar's. He pointed to the bruises on his face and said in a cold voice. Silly Zhu, aren't all the injuries on my body thanks to you? Have you lost your mind? Can't you remember? When Silly Zhu heard Yang Deming scold him for having a brain problem, where did he get so angry? Silly Zhu's anger surged to his forehead, and he rolled up his sleeves in an arrogant and malicious tone. How dare you dare to talk to me like this, kid? It seems that I played lightly. I should have beaten you to death, kid. How dare you speak to me like that? Yang Deming is not easy to bully either, looking at Silly Zhu with disdain and without any fear. As the two of them were about to fight, Zhonghai looked at the situation and secretly thought it was not good. Yang Deming clearly wants to settle the accounts. He has always been a person who navigates according to the wind and wants to quickly reconcile major matters with minor ones. Deming, everyone has been neighbors for so many years. It's just a small matter and there's no need to fight big. Besides, Silly Zhu definitely didn't mean it. Yang Deming, don't be too meticulous. Yang Deming paid no attention to this old man's words. As soon as he saw that his goal had been achieved, he turned to the entrance of the courtyard and said. Director Wang, did you hear everything just now? The silly pillar, who clenched his fist, puzzled and said. Yang Deming, are you crazy? The people of Zhonghai grew old and refined, and suddenly realized something. I cursed inwardly, not good. Director Wang and his colleagues from the security department walked confidently into the threshold of the courtyard. Caught the attention of the residents of the courtyard, they all ran over to watch the excitement. What's going on? Why did Director Wang come to our courtyard house? What happened? Oh, isn't this Yang Deming? I heard he was injured and hospitalized. Why did he come back from the hospital so quickly? Director Wang cast a serious glance at Silly Pillar and Zhonghai. We have received a report from Yang Deming that he Yuzhu intentionally injured someone and fled, causing Yang Deming to fail to receive timely treatment and resulting in physical disability. Just now, he Yuzhu also admitted to it personally. Both me and the security department heard it, and the evidence is conclusive. Can you come with us, he Yuzhu? The foolish pillar people were all scared and foolish. The colleagues in the security department were already furious and wanted to stand up for Yang Deming. At this moment, they couldn't help but rush up and suppress the foolish pillar. The onlookers in the courtyard were all shocked, and their eyes toward Silly Zhu suddenly changed. They whispered and began to discuss. I have long heard that Yang Deming was seriously injured and sent for rescue. I never expected it to be foolish Zhu who did it. Silly Zhu returned to the courtyard today just like before, with no sign of hitting someone to escape. His heart is really ruthless, hitting someone still feels like nothing happened. In the crowd, Su Damao happily held his hands and watched as his arch-nemesis, Silly Pillar, was about to suffer. He was extremely excited and shouted loudly at the security personnel. Brothers, be careful. Silly Zhu has great strength and can fight very well. You all rush forward and directly suppress him, but don't let him run away. The people in the courtyard either watch the excitement and don't care about themselves, or gloat at. There was only one person with a worried expression, looking at Silly Zhu. This person was Qin Huairu. However, she is not concerned about the safety of Silly Zhu. She is just worried that Silly Zhu will be taken away and no one will bring her a lunch box in the future. After the death of her family, there was only a large family of elderly, weak, women, and children left, and she couldn't get any good food on her own salary. If it weren't for Silly Zhu's help, I wouldn't be able to eat bran and swallow vegetables like other residents every day. As for the safety of Silly Zhu, she doesn't care. What's this about her? Silly Zhu always pesters her, she has long been extremely annoyed. Let go of me. Silly Zhu was suppressed by the security personnel, but his attitude remained very arrogant, constantly struggling. Looking at young Deming, he wished he could eat people and bared his teeth and spoke harshly. Young Deming, you dare to call someone to deal with me, right? Wait for me. I will definitely settle this account with you. What a special thing. Let go of me. The people in the security department naturally wouldn't listen to him, but instead sneered and exerted greater force to suppress him. Ah! I only heard Silly Zhu suffer from pain and let out a scream. Zhonghai beside him was burning with anxiety. He can't let anyone take Silly Pillar away. Who will take care of him after losing the Silly Pillar? Seeing Silly Zhu's defiant expression and attempting to resist, he quickly advised. Silly Pillar, if we heroes don't suffer immediate losses, don't make mistakes. Seeing that Silly Zhu didn't listen to him, Zhonghai had no choice but to turn his head and plead with Director Wang. Director Wang, I am Zhonghai, the first master of this courtyard house. Silly Zhu was someone I grew up watching from a young age. Apart from being a bit irritable, he is an honest person. On the contrary, young Deming has moral problems and often lies. Be careful and think a lot. I think there must be some misunderstanding among them. Maybe young Deming wrongly accused Silly Zhu. Director Wang, where can he trust the words of Zhonghai now? She just wants to slap the old man in the face of the lightning strikes he's planning to do now. Zhonghai, right. You're also a suspect. You should waste less saliva. Director Wang shouted to the security personnel. Take Zhonghai away too. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. Chapter 5. Zhonghai sits upright and upright. Send it to eat. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Zhonghai sits upright and upright. Send it to eat peanuts. Zhonghai was stunned when he heard Director Wang say he wanted to take him away and forgot to close his mouth. Everyone in the courtyard was also startled, curious and puzzled, whispering and discussing. I understand Director Wang wants to capture the Silly Pillar, but why should he even arrest Mr. One? Did Mr. One make a mistake? This is impossible, isn't it? Mr. E is recognized as a kind-hearted person in our courtyard. How could he have caused trouble? Perhaps Director Wang misunderstood. You're right, there must be some misunderstanding here. Maybe Mr. E has been wrongly accused. In the crowd, a short and chubby man pouted disdainfully. Zhonghai always pretended to be righteous outside, and others didn't know his true face. Didn't his second uncle Liu Haizhong know? As Zhonghai was about to suffer, Liu Haizhong was so excited that he couldn't help but jump up and scream a few words. He is an official fan who has been eyeing the position of the Red Star Courtyard One Grandpa for a long time. Now, with the help of the heavens, if anything happens to Zhonghai, this position of the One Grandpa will be his. In the center of the crowd, as the security guards were about to come up and arrest someone, Zhonghai widened his eyes and felt uncertain in his heart. Director Wang's arrest of the foolish pillar is understandable, but why should he be arrested? Could it be that Lin Xiaoshua's incident was leaked? In the next moment, Zhonghai denied this speculation in his heart. It was absolutely impossible. He only told Silly Zhu and the deaf old lady about it, and it was absolutely impossible to reveal it. After thinking about it, he tentatively asked Director Wang, "Is there any misunderstanding, Director Wang?" Several security guards came over to suppress him, but he didn't resist. His eyes were fixed on Director Wang's expression and he looked at him closely. Director Wang originally didn't want to pay attention to this old beast, but due to his cooperation in subduing him, his attitude improved a bit and he opened his mouth calmly. "Young Deming accused you, just cooperate with the investigation obediently." Zhonghai, an old and refined person, carefully chewed this sentence in his heart a few times, and suddenly realized it. He was immediately filled with joy in his heart. It seems that after young Deming was beaten by Silly Zhu, he mistakenly believed that he had instructed Silly Zhu to do so, so he went to Director Wang to sue him. Unfortunately, young Deming was completely wrong this time. Zhonghai didn't get involved in that matter at all, and even Director Wang's investigation couldn't find anything. Just now he was thinking about how to save Silly Zhu, but now young Deming himself hit the muzzle of the gun, giving him a great chance. When Director Wang investigates and proves that Zhonghai is innocent, he immediately beats young Deming and accuses him of falsely accusing him and Silly Zhu. This way, he and Silly Zhu will naturally be fine, but instead, the victim young Deming bears the charge of false accusation. Zhonghai couldn't help feeling proud in his heart. He really came up with a wonderful idea. He has always been recognized as a kind-hearted person in the courtyard, and naturally wouldn't do anything against his character in front of everyone. I saw Zhonghai, Shiran, standing even straighter than a tree trunk, with a calm and confident smile on his face. He opened his mouth and said with great righteousness, "I sit upright in my Yizhonghixing, and have never done anything wrong in my life. I am willing to accept investigation and conduct random investigations." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone in the courtyard suddenly became uproar and gave thumbs up in praise. Grandpa E truly deserves to be Grandpa E. This aura is truly amazing, and only Grandpa E can fearlessly say the phrase, "investigate casually." Isn't it? It seems that we all misunderstood Mr. E before. He has never done anything wrong in his family, and the reason why he was taken away by Director Wang was just for investigation. Director Wang and the security guards have long known the true face of Zhonghai, and they don't even accept his tricks. Upon hearing this, they sneered and cursed in their hearts, saying, "This old beast is so capable of pretending." Countless praises surrounded Zhonghai, making him feel proud and contemptuous. He glanced at young Deming on the side. This kid wants to fight Zhonghai with him. It's still a bit tender. Even though he and Silly Zhu have been caught now, he is not at all flustered in his heart and even feels proud. Don't be fooled by young Deming's arrogance now, it's because this kid doesn't even know that his first uncle has dug a pit waiting for him to jump. When his first uncle accuses him of slander, there will be times when this kid cries. He had already contacted the human trafficker, and as soon as Lin Xiaoxue finished school, he would kidnap her. Calculating the time, the human trafficker should have succeeded. By the time Director Wang investigated and found out that he and Silly Zhu were innocent, Lin Xiaoxue had already been taken out of the 49 cities by human traffickers and would never come back in her lifetime. The old lady from the Yang family was in poor health. As soon as the news of Lin Xiaoxue's disappearance spread, she estimated that she could not bear the blow and died. Without Lin Xiaoxue and Mrs. Fang, the Yang family only has a cripple named Yang Deming left. Can't even one of them, a master who knows everything, handle a cripple? Are you still casually pinching it? Although his plan was forced to be terminated due to Yang Deming's sudden discharge, after many twists and turns, he still came to the same end. In the end, will the Yang family's yard still fall into the hands of Zhonghai? Ha ha. Having figured out all the details, Zhonghai took a deep breath and became even more calm and composed, standing there leisurely as if he were an extraordinary expert. Just when he was most proud in his heart, suddenly, 2 police officers burst into the door, with a little girl and a thin monkey-like man behind them. "We have received a report that someone is selling children in the Red Star Courtyard." Zhong could no longer maintain his calm and composed demeanor, and Feng Fan was instantly horrified. The crowd in the courtyard exploded with discussion. Selling children. Do we still have people in our courtyard who are inferior to these beasts? Who on earth did Comrade Police Investigation commit such a shameless act? We must punish him severely. 2 police officers looked seriously at the skinny monkey-like man, who trembled and pointed at Zhonghai Dao. "The person who instructed me to kidnap the child is him." The people in the courtyard were shocked, first unbelievable, then angry and contemptuous. "I didn't expect Mr. E to be such a person, bah. What kind of thing? I thought he was a good person, but who would have thought he was a beast?" Zhonghai's reputation was ruined by the sudden betrayal of his relatives, and his face turned pale. Young Deming was staring coldly at Zhonghai when he suddenly saw his sister Lin Xiaoxue rushing into his arms. Her fair face was crying with tears streaming down her face, and she spoke coquettishly. "Brother, I almost can't see you, I'm so scared." The pitiful appearance moved people, and the people in the courtyard looked at the two with sympathy, shaking their heads and sighing. What kind of evil has the Lao Yang family done? It's so pitiful. Zhonghai is really not something. 2 police officers were preparing to take away Zhonghai and Silly Zhu, but Liu Haizhong and Su Damao couldn't help but jump out and gloat. These 2 people are completely despicable. Comrade Police Investigation, you must not let them go. 2 police officers solemnly assured upon hearing the words. The actions committed by these 2 individuals are unacceptable. We will definitely punish them severely and never tolerate them. Once the serious circumstances are investigated, they may be shot. When Zhonghai and Silly Zhu heard the news of their 2 men being shot, they were struck by a bolt from the blue, and their eyes immediately turned black. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. Chapter 6. Liu Haizhong falls into the well and falls into the stone. Taking the opportunity to go up. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Liu Haizhong falls into the well and falls into the stone. Take the opportunity to become a master. Zhonghai and Silly Zhu were all black in front of them, and their bodies stumbled a few steps, almost falling flat and eating shit. Silly Zhu immediately let out a mournful cry and said, "Comrade police officer, I am wrongly accused." The 2 police officers were too lazy to pay attention to him, so they handcuffed them according to the procedure. They turned around and told young Deming to go to the police station to take notes later. Finally, they escorted the 2 in front of everyone in the courtyard. Zhonghai was handcuffed and lowered his head, afraid to look at the faces of those around him. His face turned pale, and he wished he could find a crack in the ground to sneak in. He was so embarrassed. Director Wang watched as the 2 were escorted out of the gate of the courtyard by the police and sighed. It was her fault for what happened. In order to prevent such a thing from happening again, we must take this opportunity to warn others. As you just saw, doing something bad will definitely not escape legal punishment. What a glorious person Zhonghai used to be, he has not been taken away like a lost dog, his old face has been ruined. Everyone must take it as a warning and not end up in a precarious future like Zhonghai. The residents of the courtyard nodded in agreement and criticized. Zhonghai is such a scumbag. I used to think he was a good person, but now he looks like a beast. This old guy used to hide too deep, we took a wrong look at him. He doesn't even deserve to be the first master of our Red Star courtyard. Pooh. Among a group of people filled with righteous indignation, only one person was overjoyed, and this person was in the second uncle's bangs. He is an old official fan who has been eyeing the position of Red Star Courtyard 1 for a long time. Unfortunately, this position was previously occupied by Zhonghai, and he had no chance at all. Now it's okay. Zhonghai, this old guy, ruined his reputation by risking his own life. Director Wang will definitely not let him become the first uncle again. Isn't this opportunity here? In the bangs, the eyeballs rolled around and the abacus was playing with a clattering sound, thinking proudly. He needs to seize this opportunity to perform well. Maybe Director Wang will give him the position of Mr. 1. Well said. A loud roar made everyone in the courtyard involuntarily quiet down, and they all looked towards the bangs to separate the way for him as he walked over. So, Liu Haizhong walked out of the crowd, smiled warmly at Director Wang, and then suddenly waved his arms and shouted loudly. Director Wang said it well. Everyone must take it as a warning and never embarrass oneself like Zhonghai. We must all be law-abiding and qualified citizens. We must listen to Director Wang's words and not cause trouble to the country. The people in the courtyard didn't know what went wrong with Liu Haizhong suddenly. They looked at each other without saying a word, and the scene was very quiet for a moment. Liu Haizhong's face couldn't help but stiffen, and he cursed these people in his heart for being unethical. He deserved his life and couldn't get promoted or rich. As the scene became increasingly awkward, Damao suddenly jumped out and shouted loudly. Uncle Heir is right. We should be ashamed of Zhonghai and become law-abiding citizens. Heir de Yi truly deserves to be the person with the highest ideological realm in our courtyard house, much better than that Zhonghai. He should be the first de Yi of our courtyard house. Damao and Silly Zhu are sworn enemies. Due to Grandpa Yi's favoritism, he has repeatedly suffered losses under Silly Zhu, and even if he is unwilling, he can only swallow this breath. He has been displeased with Silly Pillars and Zhonghai for a long time. In the past, he couldn't afford to offend them, but now both Silly Pillars and Zhonghai are in trouble. If he doesn't stand up and step on them, Damao will be a turtle grandson. Liu Haizhong gave Damao a approving glance and secretly said that this kid is quite sensible and talented. Upon receiving his gaze, Damao immediately smiled at him like a dog's leg. Damao also has a heart for promotion and wealth. If he could use this to hold on to his thigh and his bangs, why not do it? Director Wang gave Liu Haizhong a approving glance at him for being so polite, as Silly Zhu and Zhonghai's depressed mood finally improved. The people in the courtyard were all skilled at judging Liu Haizhong's expression. Originally, they had no interest in Liu Haizhong's words, but when Director Wang looked at Liu Haizhong with approval, their attitudes changed and they all agreed. Yeah, Grandpa Heir is right. We should all listen to Director Wang's words and strive to be good citizens without causing trouble for the country. Director Wang is right, Mr. Heir is right. The scene suddenly became lively, and Director Wang nodded in satisfaction. It was really good. It seemed that everyone had learned from Zhonghai's lesson. Everyone, please be quiet. Director Wang said, and everyone else quieted down to continue speaking. Zhonghai is no longer suitable to be the first lord of a courtyard house due to his moral shortcomings, but there must be someone in charge in the courtyard. It's better for the position of first lord to be held by second lord Liu Haizhong. Everyone in the courtyard turned different faces when they heard this, while Liu Haizhong couldn't help but feel happy. Surprisingly, his dream came true. He quickly patted his chest and promised. Director Wang, don't worry, I will definitely be the loyal and responsible one in our courtyard, otherwise I will be struck by lightning. Director Wang nodded at the words and remembered that he was the first person to step forward and agree with him earlier. He thought this person was pretty good. Young Deming on one side witnessed the entire process and sneered. He knew the person in the bangs, and he was just like Zhonghai, not a good person. Director Wang finished handling everything and turned to Yang Deming. Remember to go to the police station with me to testify later. Young Deming nodded and agreed, watching her exit the gate of the courtyard. He remembered his grandmother lying at home and quickly returned to Lao Yang's house. As soon as he entered, he saw an old man lying in bed, looking at him kindly and asking, "Deming, why is it so noisy outside? What happened?" Grandma Fang Xiuying had difficulty moving and her ears were not working properly, and she couldn't hear what was happening clearly. Young Deming didn't want her to be worried at such an old age, so he avoided the importance and spoke lightly. "Oh, it's nothing, it's just that silly guy hit me." Zhonghai was biased and sheltered him, and now both of them have been arrested by the police. Grandma Fang's heart was about to overflow on her face, wiping away her tears and asking, "Do you feel any pain on your body? What's wrong with your leg?" Young Deming smiled and said, "I don't feel any pain anymore. There's nothing wrong with my leg. I'll be fine with a crutch for a while. Grandma, you don't have to worry." Grandma Fang looked at his legs and slowly nodded, letting out a sigh of relief. That's good, that's good." After all, he felt sorry for his grandson, and then began to mutter and scold Silly Zhu. "Silly Zhu, why is this child so cruel? He beat up my grandson like this and deserves to be arrested by the police. Zhonghai is not a good thing either, they deserve to be punished." Young Deming quickly comforted her while secretly thinking to himself that these two people were indeed not good people. When he went to the police station later, he wouldn't let them go either. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. Chapter 7. Qin Huairu, you don't want silly pillar to be. You are listening at novel.Audio. Chapter 7. Qin Huairu, do you also not want Silly Zhu to be sentenced to prison? A farce came to a halt, and the crowd in the courtyard slowly dispersed, whispering and discussing. Lin Xiaoxue stood at her doorstep, sobbing and holding on to Yang Deming's sleeve, unwilling to let go. "Brother." Her watery big eyes were enveloped in tears, and she looked eagerly at Yang Deming, pursing the corners of her mouth and sobbing, like a small lily dampened by rain and dew in the morning. Yang Deming had already regarded her as his younger sister and painfully wiped away her tears, coaxing her. "Xiaoxue, stop crying. With my brother around, no one can bully our family." Lin Xiaoxue burst into tears and smiled under his comfort. "Fortunately, there's an older brother here." God knows how scared she was when she was caught by human traffickers, but fortunately, Yang Deming notified the police and saved her. Yang Deming smiled and touched her head, explaining with a serious expression. "Don't let Grandma say you know what happened just now. Grandma's poor health prevents her from worrying. I will go to the police station to take notes later, and your family is up to you. Take care of your family and don't open the door until I come back, okay?" After this experience, Lin Xiaoxue's mentality has become much stronger. Upon hearing this, she forced herself to forget her fear and pick herself up. Her big eyes sparkled with stubbornness. "Don't worry, brother. Leave my family to me. I will definitely take care of my grandmother. If you don't believe me, we'll hook up." After speaking, he looked pitifully at Yang Deming, as if he didn't agree to hook up with her and didn't believe she could take care of Grandma Fang well. He looked like a fierce kitten, making him laugh uncontrollably. "Okay, I believe you, I'll hook you up." The two of them hooked up, and Lin Xiaoxue finally pursed her lips and smiled with satisfaction. After a few words with Yang Deming, she went into the house to take care of Grandma Fang. Yang Deming dared not delay and planned to go to the police station to resolve the matter as soon as possible. However, as soon as he looked up, he saw Qin Huairu standing at his doorstep, eagerly looking at him. He immediately furrowed his brow. He knew what kind of person Qin Huairu was, a woman who didn't get up early for any gain. What did she ask him for? Qin Huai looked at Yang Deming eagerly, biting his lips and tears in his eyes. Those who didn't know thought young Deming was bullying her. Young Deming was too lazy to pay attention to her, so he just gave her a break and planned to leave. Qin Huairu was dumbfounded. Why is this different from what she expected? As expected, when young Deming saw her like this, he should take the initiative to ask her what had happened and comfort her, and then she would take the opportunity to plead for Silly Zhu. Young Deming is likely to swallow this tone and forgive Silly Zhu. Who made young Deming a famous honest person? But why is this young Deming in front of me different from before? As young Deming was about to leave the gate of the courtyard, Qinhuai Ru gritted her teeth, disregarding her composure, and quickly took a step forward to stop him, eagerly speaking. Yang, I know you're a good person. Can you forgive Silly Zhu? Silly Zhu must have been obsessed, not intentional. You're so kind, can you forgive Silly Zhu this time? Don't argue with him, okay? I know you're a good person. Young Deming looked at this woman coldly. Although she looked pitiful now, in the Life Simulator, it was she who led the Lao Jia family to occupy the courtyard of the Lao Yang family and shamelessly occupied the magpie's nest. This woman dares to plead for Silly Pillar in front of him, she's really shameless. In Qin Huairu's expectant gaze, young Deming sneered and spoke. What? A good person deserves to be bullied by you guys. Since you are so considerate of Silly Zhu, why not take the initiative to go to the police station to accept punishment for him? Qin Huairu was dumbfounded, gritting her teeth and looking at him incredulously, asking her to replace Silly Zhu and accept punishment. This is absolutely impossible. The reason why she pleaded for Silly Zhu was to let him continue to bring her lunch boxes to improve her meals and provide money to support the people of the old Jia family, otherwise she wouldn't bother with that foolish guy Silly Zhu. Young Deming continued without mercy, others now wished to draw a clear line with Silly Zhu and come over eagerly to plead for him. Shouldn't it be any inexplicable relationship with Silly Zhu? If I remember correctly, it hasn't been many years since Jia Dongshu died, has it? Why can't you hold on to your widowhood? This statement is very insidious. If it weren't for Qin Huairu, this woman, being so vicious and vicious, he wouldn't have said such a thing. Upon hearing this, Qin Huairu's face turned pale and embarrassed, hesitant to speak again. Nowadays, a woman's reputation is very important. If it were to be spread, she wouldn't have to be a good person anymore. Moreover, the reason why she waited for everyone to disperse before daring to come to young Deming to plead for mercy was to not leave any words to damage her reputation. Young Deming sneered disdainfully at her appearance and left without bothering to bother him. When I arrived at the entrance of the courtyard, I found Director Wang waiting for him and explained. Just be honest when you arrive at the police station. Young Deming nodded and said, okay, I got it. After finishing speaking, he and Director Wang headed towards the direction of the police station. As they were walking, they suddenly caught up with someone behind them, and upon seeing it, they discovered that it was Aunt Yi. As a family member of Yi Zhonghai, Aunt Yi also had to go to the police station. She looked at young Deming apologetically and opened her mouth several times without saying a word. She and Yi Zhonghai have been married for so many years, and Yi Zhonghai has a clear idea in his belly. Isn't it that he wants to anger Grandma Fong and kidnap Lin Xiaoxue to occupy the yard of Lao Yang's house, using Lao to please Silly Zhu and Qin Huairu? What a sin! Although she knew that Yi Zhonghai was caught by the police and deserved it, it was impossible for her not to stand on Yi Zhonghai's side. Therefore, she had no choice but to plead with Yi Zhonghai without conscience. Deming, Auntie knows that you are a good child and is most reasonable. This is actually a misunderstanding, it was the false accusation of that human trafficker. Don't you know what kind of person Grandpa Yi is? He is a top-notch person. When you arrive at the police station later, you can say it's all a misunderstanding, and then sign a letter of understanding, okay? Can you let Uncle One go? Upon hearing this, young Deming was almost laughing with anger. How thick of a face would it take to say such a thing of calling a deer a horse? He didn't speak, just sneered at Aunt. Aunt lowered her head and dared not look into his eyes, saying that this was a misunderstanding that only fools would believe. If it weren't for her own old man, she wouldn't have said such shameless things. Young Deming's refusal was very obvious, and she could only reluctantly sigh and follow him into the gate of the police station. As soon as I entered, I heard Silly Zhu's voice resounding loudly. I didn't intentionally do it, he fell on his own, it's none of my business. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. Chapter 8. Silly Pillar ni Zhonghai shout for justice. Yang Deming. You are listening at novel.Audio. Chapter 8. Silly Pillar ni Zhonghai shout for justice. Yang Deming refuses to sign the letter of understanding. Police investigation comrades, you must believe me. I didn't even push that Yang Deming, it was that guy who wrongly accused me. In the interrogation room, Silly Zhu handcuffed his hands and screamed in great excitement. Zhonghai knew in his heart that trafficking in human beings was a serious crime, and he made up his mind not to admit it, defending himself. Comrade Police Inspector, how could I have done such a crazy thing at such an old age? This is a misunderstanding. I don't even know that human trafficker. He slandered me just to get away with his crime. I'm wrongly accused. Comrades in the police investigation, you can't trust that heinous human trafficker, regardless of the life or death of me as a good person. I'm wrongly accused. Silly Zhu and Zhonghai, one manic and the other calm, both refused to admit their crimes and vigorously cried out for justice. Unfair. Comrade Police Investigation, we are unjust. You police investigation cannot wrongly accuse good people. It's unreasonable, it's snowing in June. The two police investigators on the opposite side also looked helpless, and the suspect refused to admit his crime. Without direct evidence, they cannot do anything to these two people, they can only helplessly say. Alright, you guys shut up. Quiet. Where can Silly Zhu and Zhonghai listen to them? Although they may not admit it verbally, they are clear about what they have done. The more I feel guilty, the more I want to show my innocence in front of the police investigation, trying my best to show that I am innocent. Two police officers were very helpless about these shameless two people, and they didn't know what to do. At that very moment, Director Wang came in with Yang Deming and Aunt. Shameless to the extreme. Yang Deming looked coldly at Silly Zhu and Zhonghai. Both police officers breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the victim arrived, otherwise they would have been killed by those two people arguing. Ah, just in time. Now these two suspects are crying out their grievances. As police officers, we cannot be partial to one side and will not believe the one-sided statements of either side. Yang Deming, right. As the victim of this case, could you describe the situation as finely as possible? As soon as these words were spoken, Zhonghai and Silly Zhu both looked at Yang Deming with pleading eyes, hoping that he would let go of himself and not tell the police everything, so that there was no room for a turnaround in this matter. Yang Deming glanced coldly at the two, feeling only anger in his heart. He could hear clearly what these two people had said just now, and these two beasts had no remorse at all. He was right in deciding not to sign the letter of understanding before, these two beasts are not worth forgiving at all. Lazy to bother with those two shameless and skinny things, he nodded and said, okay. Then he recounted all the events of that day, from being stopped by Silly Zhu while stealing a lunchbox, to later being pushed by Silly Zhu in anger, causing him to hit the back of the head. In the end, Silly Zhu knew he was injured and unconscious, but disregarded it and left. After speaking, he also pointed to the bruises on his face and the crutch path. The injury on my face and this cane are all ironclad evidence. As for the evidence of Zhonghai's crime, you can directly ask the human traffickers, Comrade Police Investigation. As soon as these words were spoken, both Zhonghai and Silly Zhu collapsed on their chairs as if they had lost their strength, resenting young Deming for being so heartless that he really wanted to send them to jail. Two police officers were recording something in their notebooks while nodding and saying, "Okay, we have understood the situation on your end. If there is concrete evidence, we will definitely give you a satisfactory explanation." Before she could finish speaking, a female police officer left and placed a document in front of two police officers. "We have thoroughly investigated the situation on the human trafficker's side. If the human trafficker bit him to death, it was Zhonghai who instigated him to sell human beings. We have also found eyewitnesses to prove that Zhonghai and the human trafficker have met." Two police officers exhaled and nodded at the female police officer to investigate. "Okay, we got it. It's been tough." Then he turned his head and looked sharply at Zhonghai and Silly Zhu.At. "The evidence is now conclusive. The circumstances of what you two committed are serious, and the charges will be implemented for at least 3 years. It's best for you to be prepared." Young Deming's expression softened and he nodded in satisfaction, secretly saying that the laws in this era were quite strict, and this result was reasonable. Zhonghai and Silly Zhu were not in such a good mood anymore, as if they had been struck by lightning, their hearts turned to ashes, and they screamed in despair. 3 years. I want to go to jail for 3 years. Zhonghai's face turned gray, and he lowered his head and stared. "It's over, it's completely over now. Zhonghai Ingming, I never expected to wet my shoes at this time. I'm not sure about my old age." Silly Zhu didn't have the deep city like Zhonghai, so he became furious and angrily cursed at young Deming. "Okay, you young Deming, did you deliberately harm me, didn't you? You're happy to see me in prison, right? I won't let you go. Don't think that if I go to jail, I won't be able to do anything to you. Even if I go to jail, I can still harm you. Not only will I harm you, but I will also harm the whole family. Wait for me, kid, and see how I can kill you." Young Deming quietly drove him crazy, his face full of disdain, and he didn't even take Silly Zhu's words seriously. The police officer couldn't continue listening and angrily said, "Do you dare to speak up at the police station?" Zhonghai weakly advised, "Silly pillar, stop talking. If you don't want to die, just say a few words less." Then he looked at young Deming and immediately changed his face, trying to please and be attentive. "Deming, it used to be me, Zhonghai, who was old and foolish. Can you just let me and Silly Zhu go? I will definitely remember your great kindness. Deming, I know you're a good child. Considering that Grandpa is so old, why don't you give me a break? Please." Young Deming looked at him coldly with such a pitiful expression, only thinking it was ridiculous. When he was calculating his own family, he did not pity his own family. Aunt observed her words and expressions, and saw that young Deming's heart was so hard that she didn't move at all. She knelt down for him and pleaded in tears. "Deming, why don't you sign the letter of understanding and spare us once? If you don't sign the letter of understanding, wouldn't you want us to die? Why are you so heartless?" Two police officers and Director Wang fully respected the opinions of the victims and asked, "Young Deming, are you willing to sign a letter of understanding? If you sign a letter of understanding, the punishment for Zhonghai and Silly Zhu will be much smaller, and there may even be no need to go to jail." Everyone present looked at young Deming, who sneered with a frosty expression on his face. "Don't sign. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. Chapter 9. Passing by a carpenter's shop to make a wheelchair for my grandmother. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Passing by a carpenter's shop to make a wheelchair for my grandmother, and he pleads with the police. Zhonghai's face, which had once raised a glimmer of hope, turned pale again. He collapsed on the chair with a lifeless expression, his eyes straight. Silly Zhu couldn't bear the emotional ups and downs from expectation to despair. He collapsed and shouted loudly, so he smashed his jar and cursed at young Deming. If I'm done, I won't make your young family better. You all have to bury me. You young Deming, and your sister Lin Xiaoxue, your grandmother has to die for me. All of them have to die for me. I curse that none of your Lao Yang family can die easily. None can die easily. He not only cursed with his mouth, but also punched and kicked with his hands and feet, pounding the table in front of him like a madman. The two police officers couldn't continue listening and frowned and scolded. What do you think this is? Do you want to shout like this? Shut up. Director Wang also expressed disgust and said, "It's not that I'm talking about you, silly pillar. This matter was originally your fault, and it's just that you didn't repent. You even cursed the people of the old Yang family. I don't know what to say about you. Are your heart black?" Under the intimidation of two police officers, Silly Zhu had to close his mouth, but his eyes remained fixed on young Deming. Young Deming glanced at him with a disdainful expression. In his view, Silly Zhu's appearance was nothing more than the incompetence and rage of a manic patient, and the final arrogance of a desperate homeless dog. He didn't even bother to pay attention to it. The police cleared up the documents and said to young Deming, "Silly Zhu has injured you like this. It's easy to say about the external injury on your face, mainly because your left leg is directly disabled. The situation is serious, and besides going to jail, he also needs to pay you compensation." "What? Compensation? He has harmed me like this, why should I still pay him compensation?" "I disagree. I disagree." The three words compensation undoubtedly dealt a heartfelt blow to Silly Zhu. It was like killing someone's heart. Money is very important to him, especially Qin Huairu is willing to talk to him because of his money. And he thought he was right, it was young Deming who caused him this kind of harm, and he should be asked to compensate him. Now asking him to compensate young Deming is simply incomprehensible and unreasonable. Two police officers frowned and scolded him, "If you're not satisfied, go appeal. What's the name here? If you don't shut up, I won't be polite." Silly Zhu had a face full of discontent and anger, but under the intimidation of the police, he had to hold it back and turned red. In the end, he collapsed on the chair as if losing all his strength, as if losing his soul. Young Deming glanced at Silly Zhu, sneered disdainfully, and then thanked the two police officers and Director Wang. The matter came to a temporary end here, and he left the police station in a very good mood. Passing by a carpenter's shop on the road, his footsteps suddenly stopped and he stared at the shop, pondering. In the experience of the Sims, he gained a first-level carpentry skill and cannot waste it in vain. Grandma Yang is not in good health and has inconvenient legs and feet. She often stays in bed, so why not make her a wheelchair so that she can go out and take a look? At this moment, it was already late, and young Deming said he would do it as soon as he said, and strode into the carpenter's shop. The carpenter's shop owner was cleaning when he saw him smiling. "If the young man customizes the furniture, come back tomorrow. It's getting late now and I have to close the store." Young Deming also smiled and said, "Boss, I'm not here to customize furniture. I'm also a carpenter and want to make something by myself." The boss glanced at him unexpectedly and said, "Are you also a carpenter? I can sell wood and rent tools in this store at a reasonable price, but carpentry is not just for fun. Do you really know how to do it?" Young Deming confidently said, "I dare not speak big, I still have confidence in some small things." The boss nodded and asked him to come back tomorrow. Young Deming smiled and pointed out the carpenter's shop. At the same time, the interrogation room of the police station. Auntie pulled the sleeves of two police officers and cried until she had a runny nose and tears. Her body swayed and she watched as she accidentally fell down. "Comrades, please be kind and help my old man. My old man can't have any trouble, otherwise how can I live? I might as well die." My old man is usually a famous old man, as we all know. He was just momentarily lost in his mind, and he already knew he was wrong. Please spare him. The two police officers have told her countless times, and now they can only reluctantly repeat it. Madam, what you said is not right. Our police officers are public servants of the people and are meant to serve the whole people. How can we bend the law for personal gain? Your words are not appropriate. Please let go of us, we still have business to attend to. Speaking of which, they have long been impatient. Why is this ant so difficult to understand people's language? If it weren't for the fact that this elderly woman looked unwell and could easily faint at any moment, they would have already pushed her away and wouldn't have delayed her for so long. Comrade Police Inspector, please. Help my old man. Aunt E knelt down directly, pulling on the pants of the two police officers and howling, looking extremely pitiful. However, the two police officers had no sympathy in their hearts. Her old man dared to sell human beings. Shouldn't he face legal trial? Besides, if every prisoner's family comes up with this trick, what would the police investigation department do to eat? But this ant is really difficult to resist, and the last two police officers looked at each other helplessly. Okay, Auntie, we really can't take control of this matter, but there are still a few days from arrest and detention to conviction and sentencing in the case. If you can get the victim's forgiveness letter, then you can handle it lightly. Auntie wiped her tears and looked at the two police officers eagerly with her mouth open, feeling quite at a loss as she murmured. Didn't you see young Deming's attitude just now, Comrade Police Inspector? He would never write a letter of understanding for my old man. What should we do? The two police officers didn't want to be with her anymore and left a message saying, this is not something we should consider anymore, and then quickly slipped away. Aunt Yi's tears suddenly came down again, eagerly looking at Zhonghai. What should we do, old man? Zhonghai let out a deep sigh, regretting his actions for the first time in his life. He had known that young Deming was so difficult to provoke and would not have taken action. Unfortunately, it was already too late to say anything now. He pondered for a moment and said to Aunt E. There's only one last resort now. Go find the deaf old lady, she must have a way to get young Deming to sign a letter of understanding. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. Chapter 10. Yen Bugui's calculation. Young Deming, Jia. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Yen Bugui's calculation of Yang Deming and Jia Zhang's strange Yin and Yang Deming went to the vegetable market before leaving the carpenter's shop and returning home. Give me this chicken. He made a selection and picked the whole chicken. The meat was plump and tender, and he took it back to make soup just right. The landlady weighed the killed chicken and packed it up. Suddenly, her gaze stopped at young Deming's legs, and a hint of sympathy flashed on her face. Poor thing, such a young man is actually a cripple. How can he live in the future? The landlady sighed inwardly, but didn't ask any more questions, so as not to make the young man feel inferior and just say. This chicken is free for a small fraction. As soon as Auntie sees you, she likes it and treats you to eat. Young Deming was taken aback and followed the boss's gaze towards his disabled left leg. In an instant, he realized that the boss's wife was pitying him. There was a feeling of being unable to laugh or cry in his heart. He had not shed a single tear for his disabled left leg, but rather someone else was vying to sympathize with him. But he's not someone who likes to take advantage of small things, he said with a smile. The boss doesn't need it anymore, let's stick to the original price. The landlady's eyes widened and she said, if I say I'm free, then I'm free. Don't tell me too much. After paying the money, young Deming held his muscles in his hand, feeling a bit amused by the fact that he had taken advantage of it. At the same time, he felt very touched and couldn't help but sigh. People in this era have a unique and simple heart, which is moving. Not everyone is like the beasts in the courtyard of a quadrangle, constantly scheming and scheming. In this era, there are still many simple and innocent people. As for the occasional weakness of his left leg, young Deming is very open-minded and optimistic. Although he can no longer be a security guard due to his disabled left leg, he can become a carpenter. In that simulation life, even if it wasn't long, he remembered very clearly that he earned much more money as a carpenter than as a security guard. He now has a better choice and doesn't have to worry about being a security guard. This is also the reason why he is willing to buy chicken to eat now. With a considerable income, there is no need to deduct and search, just like security guards in the past, they cannot afford to eat chicken once a month. Carrying the chicken, young Deming happily returned to the courtyard. As soon as I stepped into the threshold of the courtyard, I met the third master Yen Bugui head-on. He was taken aback, then walked straight away with a cold face as if he hadn't seen him. He knows the person Yen Bugui, the third uncle. He is very fond of being ungrateful, selfish, and even likes to take advantage of small things. It's not good to meet him. Yen Bugui was originally about to go out for a walk after dinner, but coincidentally met young Deming who came back. His gaze was instantly drawn to the chicken in his hand, and he couldn't even move away. This is chicken, God knows how long it's been since he's been exposed to meat and fish. Staring eagerly as young Deming returned home carrying chicken, he took a sip of saliva and began to calculate to himself. How can young Deming afford chicken now? Looking at young Deming's back leaning on a bachelor, he suddenly realized that it must have been foolish to compensate young Deming. Lao Yang's family is now wealthy and can afford chicken. Yen Bugui wanted to come over and pluck his hair, but he was extremely greedy. Immediately, his eyes rolled around and he began to have a devilish idea. Since the food at Lao Yang's house has improved and he can still afford meat, why don't he pretend to lend Lin Xiaoxua extra classes and establish a good relationship with young Deming, so that he can go to Lao Yang's house to eat, drink, and take advantage in the future. That's a great idea. Yen Bugui clapped his hands together 11 times, drooling and laughing. On the other side of the old Jia family, the harsh Jia Zhang family was cursing at Qinhuai Ru, staring at her with eyes that wished they had eaten her. My son Jia Dongshu hasn't been around for long. You little rascal can't hold on anymore and is starting to collude with men. You're a notorious loser, I'll beat you to death. After speaking, he picked up a chicken feather duster and threw it at Qinhuai Ru, cursing loudly as he spoke. Don't think I haven't seen it. Although I'm old, my eyes are very sharp. I clearly see you pleading with young Deming for that silly boy. What? Are you having an affair with Silly Zhu? Otherwise, how could you eagerly plead for him? Tell him quickly, right? Qinhuai Ru was simply speechless, avoiding the beating of the feather duster while sobbing and explaining. I don't have it, I'm all thinking for the sake of the Lao Jia family. After speaking, tears streamed down my face, and the grievances in my heart almost overwhelmed me. Is it easy for her to get married in Qinhuai? Since her man Jia Dongshu disappeared, she, as a weak woman, has taken on the burden of supporting her family. She has to support a family of 5 alone, how can she afford it? A family may starve to death. In order to make a living, she had no choice but to compromise with Silly Zhu, just to make her family eat their fill. However, Jia Zhang maliciously speculated on her, how could she not be wronged and sad? Jia Zhang listened to her words and crossed her waist with both hands, making a foul voice and a foul airway. Okay, then explain it to me. If you don't explain it clearly, I'll kill you today. Qinhuai Ru sobbed with grievances, don't you think about it. If Silly Zhu really goes to jail, who will bring us lunch boxes and who will lend us money in the future? Without Silly Zhu, our family won't have boxed meals now, and we'll have to eat wawatu every meal in the future. No, not even wawatu. Jia Zhang was taken aback for a moment and realized that she didn't want to live a life where she couldn't even eat enough. This was simply not a human life. However, it is impossible for her to admit her mistake, and she becomes more bossy and down.To.Earth. Since you know, why don't you hurry up and make a nest head? You want to starve me to death. I'll go out and find some memes to come back for dinner. After speaking, she left the door of her hometown Jia, but coincidentally met Deming at the entrance of the courtyard. Watching him carrying a chicken into the door of Lao Yang's house, she suddenly collapsed. Her Lao Jia family is now eating bran and swallowing vegetables, while his Lao Yang family is eating chicken. Why? The resentment in her heart suddenly erupted, and she sat on the side and began to force Lai, showing a strange attitude towards Yang Deming. Oh my goodness, it's unreasonable. Yang Deming has no conscience. Who doesn't know that my Lao Jia family's conditions are not good? Who hasn't helped my family in this courtyard house before, but his Lao Yang family is just an iron rooster. Watching the people of my Lao Jia family suffer, they are actually indifferent and heartless. Oh my goodness, it's not fair. Even kind-hearted families like my Lao Jia family don't have chicken to eat. Why should someone like Lao Yang's family, who is so heartless, eat chicken? Yang Deming, who has no father or mother, has no upbringing. He deserves to walk on the road and fall into a cripple. Why didn't he fall to death? Pooh. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th.